You're fired. Think of it as my wedding present. Those words glowed on my phone screen, searing themselves into my mind as I stood in a white bridal gown, my bouquet still warm in my hands. Just minutes earlier, I had said yes to the man I loved most in the world. Now I stood in the marble-lined foyer of St. Alden's Hall, surrounded by crystal vases, drifting music, and the distant laughter of guests. My heart pounded as disbelief settled in. Evan Rourke, the owner's son at my company, and the man who had turned my work life into a nightmare for the last 4 months, had deliberately chosen my wedding day to fire me. I showed the message to my newly married husband, Daniel. I expected anger, shock, maybe even rage. Instead, he smiled, a calm, knowing smile. He gently squeezed my shaking hands, kissed my fingers, and whispered, "Put the phone away, read the rest later. Today is ours." How could he be so calm? I had just lost my position as Senior Operations Coordinator at Northline Urban Group, the most influential design and development firm in Brighton City, a role I had worked relentlessly for, a career I had built over nearly 3 years of sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends. Yet something in Daniel's eyes told me to trust him. So I muted my phone, slipped it into my sister's clutch, and stepped through the tall doors beside my husband, into a storm of petals, applause, and celebration. 3 hours later, during our first dance, my maid of honor Lena rushed toward me, her face pale. "Amara, your phone hasn't stopped vibrating. There are over 90 missed calls." I checked the screen. Calls from coworkers, unknown office numbers, and 14 missed calls from one name that made my stomach drop. Richard Rourke, founder and CEO of Northline Urban Group, Evan's father. That's when I understood. This wasn't just a firing, this was the beginning of something far bigger. My name is Amara Collins, and until that message arrived, I was the operational backbone of Northline Urban Group. I've always been precise, the kind of person who organizes grocery lists by aisle and notices blueprint inconsistencies at a glance. At work, people jokingly called me the archive because I remembered everything: client preferences, permit numbers, revision histories, all without checking a file. I grew up in a household where discipline mattered. Both my parents were educators. When my mother underwent emergency surgery during my second year of university, I nearly dropped out to help cover expenses. Instead, I took extra coursework while working evening shifts at a local copy center. I graduated with top honors in construction operations management, along with certifications in digital systems integration and municipal planning workflows. That's how Richard Rourke caught my attention. He hired me to overhaul Northline's outdated internal systems. From scratch, I built a proprietary workflow platform that tracked every drawing revision, cost adjustment, client note, and permit requirement. The results were undeniable. Project turnaround times improved by nearly 1/3. Client complaints dropped sharply. Richard once told me I was the smartest operational decision this firm ever made. Then his son arrived. At 34, Evan Rourke had rotated through multiple leadership roles without ever excelling. He had confidence, the right last name, and none of the patience or competence required for the job. About 4 months ago, Richard announced a partial step back from daily operations, promoting Evan to division head, making me my direct supervisor. Everything changed overnight. Where Richard once asked for my input, Evan excluded me entirely. Where my innovations were once praised, Evan presented them as his own. When I scheduled documentation sessions so others could learn my system, Evan canceled them, calling them wasteful overhead. Around that same time, I met Daniel. He worked in the municipal approvals department, reviewing major development submissions. Unlike most people behind the counter, he actually cared, asked questions, flagged inconsistencies, and insisted on clarity. Professional conversations turned into coffee breaks, coffee turned into dinners, and slowly Daniel became my safe place from the pressure building at work. What I didn't know then was that he had begun noticing troubling irregularities in several Northline submissions, specifically the ones Evan had personally modified. 2 months later, Daniel proposed. We planned a simple wedding, no excess, no delays, partly because that's who we were, and partly because I sensed my position at Northline was becoming unstable. Evan had started talking about efficiency cuts and realignment. I never imagined he'd fire me on my wedding day. As the reception continued, I slipped into a quiet side room and listened to Richard Rourke's voicemail. Amara, this is Richard. Call me immediately. Evan had no authority to terminate you. This is a serious error. We need you. Message after message followed, each more frantic. The central redevelopment submission is due Monday morning. No one can access your system. The team can't locate the final revisions. Evan doesn't have the correct credentials. Everything is frozen. By the final message, his voice cracked. We're a complete standstill. I sat down, my gown pooling around me, and felt something unexpected. Control. For nearly 3 years, I had built a system so seamless that I navigated it instinctively, but so layered that without proper training, it was unusable. Training Evan deliberately blocked. I was the only person who fully understood it, and on what should have been the worst day of my professional life, I held all the leverage. Daniel found me there reading quietly. There's something you should know, he said. The submissions Evan handled, he altered them after engineering approval, reduced safety margins, cheaper materials, things that should never pass inspection. My blood ran cold. That's dangerous. I've documented everything, Daniel replied. I was planning to report it soon. Now I understood his smile earlier. This wasn't a loss, it was freedom. Evan Rourke didn't just lose his position, he was quietly pushed out of every major development circle in the region. His professional credentials were placed under suspension while multiple reviews were conducted. Northline Urban Group absorbed massive financial losses, and a reputation that had taken decades to build unraveled in a matter of weeks. Through industry whispers, I later learned that Richard Rourke had been hospitalized briefly after the pressure became too much. The news brought me no satisfaction. Before his judgment had been clouded by loyalty to his son, Richard had been a fair leader and a genuine mentor. While Northline struggled, my consulting firm surged forward. Within half a year, I had secured contracts with multiple municipal authorities, and demand grew so quickly that I began hiring a small team just to keep up. Daniel was formally recognized for his ethical diligence at the approvals office and promoted to a senior review role. We purchased our first home together, an aging property with solid foundations and endless potential. It felt fitting. We were rebuilding too. Exactly 1 year after my wedding, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Amara, some mistakes can never be erased, but acknowledgement is the first step towards accountability. Over the past year, I have worked to repair what both my son and my own failures damaged. Evan has completed an extensive ethics program and now works under strict supervision in an entry-level role. He understands the seriousness of his actions. Northline Urban Group has undergone complete restructuring, new leadership, new systems, and rigorous review protocols. We are no longer the company you left. I am not asking you to return. I know that chapter is closed, but I hope you might consider consulting with us to ensure we never again compromise public trust. Whether you accept or decline, please know my respect for you has only deepened. Richard Rourke. That evening, I showed the letter to Daniel. What do you think? I asked. He thought carefully. Why would you go? Closure? Professional curiosity? To see if change is real? All of that, I admitted, and maybe to see whether people truly can learn. Then you already have your answer, he said. I agreed to the meeting. When my assistant told me Richard had requested it be held at Northline's headquarters, I nearly declined. Walking back into that building felt like reopening a sealed chapter. Still, curiosity won. The moment I arrived, I noticed the difference. New staff, new workflows displayed on monitors, a different energy entirely. In the main conference room, I found Richard and Evan. Richard stood to greet me. Evan remained seated, his eyes fixed on the table. Richard looked older than I remembered. Stress had etched itself into his face. Thank you for coming, he said. Evan finally spoke. I owe you an apology. What I did was reckless, selfish, and dangerous. There's no excuse. His words were careful, but the shame seemed real. I acknowledge it, I replied evenly. Richard slid a folder across the table. Inside were detailed documents outlining Northline's rebuilt systems, independent reviews, mandatory cross-checks, safety verifications. The proposal was thorough. There was also a consulting agreement with a significant fee attached. "We're not asking you to return," Richard said quickly, "only to evaluate what we've rebuilt." Then Evans stood again and placed a smaller envelope in front of me. Inside was a check, matching the full cost of my wedding, itemized precisely. "That won't be necessary," I said calmly. Before anyone could respond, Evan placed a small USB drive beside it. "It's your system," he said. "All access restored. It never worked properly without you. It belongs to you." Holding that drive, I realized something important. True revenge doesn't always require action. Sometimes it arrives on its own, through consequences, accountability, and growth. I stood. "I'll review your proposal," I said calmly. "My consulting fee will be 3 times the initial offer, paid upfront. Full transparency, full access." Richard agreed instantly. "And one more condition," I added, looking directly at Evan. "You will personally complete every training module I assign: ethics, compliance, proper project management. You will become an expert in doing things the right way." Evan nodded without hesitation. As I left, I added one final thought. The check isn't needed. Watching integrity finally matter is payment enough. That evening, over dinner, my phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. The firm that had taken over the downtown redevelopment project, Northline's former competitor, was under investigation for bribery and regulatory manipulation. I looked at Daniel. If they collapse, that project stalls again. Jobs, funding, everything. Daniel nodded, and this time the state is involved. I leaned back, realizing something new. This story wasn't over. It was evolving. If the redevelopment stalled again, the transformation everyone had promised for years would collapse one more time. "Maybe this is why Richard contacted you now," Daniel said quietly. "He must have known what was coming. He's positioning Northline to step back in when the other firm falls." The realization struck hard. I wasn't being approached out of remorse or respect. I was being recruited because they needed my systems, my credibility, my leverage, once again. I felt that old sting return. "What are you going to do?" Daniel asked, watching my expression darken. "I need time," I said, pushing my plate away. "This isn't something I rush." Sleep never came. All night questions circled my mind. Was Evan's remorse real or rehearsed? Was Richard committed to reform or simply protecting his legacy? And most importantly, what role did I want in what came next? By morning, I had clarity. At 7 a.m., I called Richard. "I've reconsidered," I said calmly. "I won't consult for Northline." The disappointment in his silence was unmistakable. "But," I continued, "I am open to something else. A partnership." "A partnership," he repeated. "My firm controls project management and regulatory compliance. Northline handles design and construction. Separate entities, equal partners." "That's highly unconventional," he said carefully. "So was firing someone on their wedding day," I replied evenly. Silence. "I won't return to a structure where I can be sidelined again," I said. "But I do want this project done properly. The community deserves that." Another pause. "And Evan?" Richard asked. "He works for you, not me. But any project he touches goes through triple verification by my team. No exceptions. I'll need board approval." "You have 24 hours," I replied. "After that, I'll submit my own proposal to the city." When the call ended, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Ownership. Not reaction. Creation. 23 hours later, Richard called back. "The board agrees," he said, "with one condition: a minimum multi-year commitment." 2 years, I countered, with a performance-based extension. Agreed. Just like that, Precision Protocol Consulting secured its largest client. 2 weeks later, when the competitor firm was officially removed from the project, our partnership stepped in, armed with revised plans, reinforced safety standards, and a system designed to prevent shortcuts before they could happen. The city awarded us the contract. The press called it a new benchmark for architectural accountability. Evan was assigned junior project coordinator, several levels below his former role. Every morning, my team issued him a training module. Every evening, he was tested. Failures meant repetition. He never complained. 3 months in, I arrived early for a site inspection and found Evan already there, checking material specifications against approved plans. "You don't need to do that personally," I said. "I know, but I need to understand everything from the ground up." I studied him. "Why?" I asked. "Why fire me on my wedding day?" He swallowed. "Because I knew you were right, and I couldn't stand it." The honesty startled me. "I thought hurting you would make me feel powerful," he said quietly. "Instead, everything collapsed, and I saw what I'd destroyed." "You can't undo the past," I said, "but you can decide who you become next." "I want to earn it," he said, "properly." "Then start here," I replied, pointing to his notes. For the next hour, I taught him not just rules, but reasoning. He listened. He asked questions. He learned. Months passed. The project advanced ahead of schedule. Our partnership model drew national interest. My firm expanded steadily. Northline rebuilt itself, carefully, transparently. 6 months later, Richard requested my input on Evan's promotion. "One condition," I said. "He handles the next community presentation alone." I attended anonymously. Evan stood before residents, nervous, honest, accountable. "This project failed before because of my mistakes," he told them. "I won't allow that again." By the end, skepticism had softened into trust. The next day, I approved the promotion. Standing at my office window later, watching the skyline evolve, I realized something profound. This wasn't the revenge I once imagined. It was better. I hadn't destroyed them. I'd changed the system that created them. That evening, walking past the construction site, Daniel squeezed my hand. "Are you happy with how it ended?" he asked. "I'm satisfied," I said, "because real change happened." As we walked on, my phone buzzed. A message from Evan. "Thank you for supporting my promotion. I won't let you down." I replied, "Make sure you don't. Some gifts can't be returned." The timing wasn't lost on either of us. Exactly 1 year after his so-called gift to me. Some people might say I should have crushed him. They'd be wrong. True power isn't destruction. It's restraint backed by strength. In the end, I didn't just recover. I rebuilt.